Welcome to Monalytics. Let's get right into it. I want you to look at this number, $113 billion. That is the staggering amount Americans paid in credit card interest and fees in 2018 alone.
I mean, that is just a mind-boggling amount of money, right? And it brings up a huge question, one we're going to tackle today. If using credit is so obviously costly, why does it feel so easy, so completely frictionless?
Welcome back to Moneylytics, the place where money meets research. And today, oh man, are we diving deep? We're getting into all the peer-reviewed evidence on something called the pain of paying.
So to really get a handle on why we spend the way we do today, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to start with the one foundational idea that really kicked off our understanding of the psychology of money. So what is this pain of paying? Well, at its heart, it's this really visceral emotional reaction we have when we hand over our money. It's not about logic or math. It's that immediate gut punch feeling of displeasure you get right when you make a payment. This whole idea was first cooked up way back in 1997 by a researcher named Ofer Zellermeyer, and his description was simple. He called it, quote, an immediate sense of displeasure or pain when making a payment. And believe it or not, that one simple, powerful phrase, that's basically the starting point, the thesis for everything we're going to break down today. You know, Zellermeyer's original research was a total game changer. His big finding was that spending literally creates this immediate emotional pain, and that pain acts like a natural brake on how much we buy. Now, how do you figure this out? He used qualitative interviews. Basically, he just sat down and asked people to tell him about painful shopping experiences. And while that's super insightful, it's also the study's big limitation, right? It's all based on a small number of stories, not big data. But for getting this whole conversation started, it absolutely earns a high impact score of 4 out of 5.
But here's what happened. That simple idea got twisted into this pop finance myth that cash always hurts more. So now, let's flip the script. Let's look at the antithesis, the more recent, really rigorous data that starts to poke some serious holes in that old assumption. And for this part of the story, our key guide is the PhD dissertation from Dr. Farnoosh Rashadi, which she completed in 2020 at West Virginia University. This isn't just one study. It's a super comprehensive review that really puts those popular ideas about the pain of paying under the microscope. And this is where the big challenge to that old theory really comes into play. What Rashadi found was that the common things we think measure the pain of paying, the whole cash versus credit debate, or those scales that label you a tightwad or a spendthrift, they're actually pretty weak at predicting the pain people actually feel. Her method was solid. She did a huge literature review and ran her own experiments. The only catch is that the experiments were based on hypothetical scenarios. But because this work so thoroughly stress-tested that original idea, we're giving it a critical impact score of 5 out of 5. It's that important. Okay, so this sets up the central conflict perfectly. On one side, you have the pop finance myth. Cash always hurts more than credit cards. But what's the peer-reviewed reality? Well, study after study finds no significant difference in pain. Turns out it's not the form of payment, but the transparency. How obvious the cost is, that's the real key. And that other myth, that the tightwad spendthrift scale can tell you how much pain you feel, the data shows it only explains about 18% of what's going on. That makes it a pretty terrible substitute for actually measuring the emotion. So, okay, we have the old idea and the new challenge. But how does any of this hold up in our super digital tap-to-pay world? To figure that out, let's bring it all together and look at a case study on cashless payments. All right, check this out. A 2025 study from the International Journal of Accounting and Financial Management Research dug into how students spend using digital wallets. And what they find? The sheer ease of using a digital wallet leads to a mix, some responsible spending, but also some impulsive buys. But here's the fascinating part. It wasn't peer pressure driving their decisions. Nope. The real key factor was a student's own perceived control over their money. Now, the limitation is pretty obvious. It's just students, so we can't assume it applies to everyone. Still, for its relevance to how we live today, we're giving it a solid impact score of 3 out of 5. Okay, so we've got the thesis, the antithesis, and a modern synthesis. Now it's time for my favorite part, the data war. This is where we throw all this research into the ring, put it head-to-head, and see where it all collides. And more importantly, what we can learn from that clash. Let's just map this out so it's crystal clear. We start with Zellermeyer back in '97, who established that this pain is a real, visceral emotion, but his research was qualitative. Fast forward to 2020, and Rashadi comes along and shows that how we measure that pain is pretty flawed, even if her work used hypothetical situations. And then, the 2025 study brings it into the modern age, showing that in a digital world, our sense of control is a huge driver, even with a limited student sample. You see the pattern here, right? Each study is building on the last, getting us a little bit closer to the real story. So where does that leave us? What's the final verdict from this academic throwdown? Well, here are the big takeaways. First, everyone agrees. The psychological friction of paying is a real thing. It definitely influences us. But here's the major disagreement. That classic idea that cash is just automatically more painful, the hard data just doesn't back that up. And finally, there's a big methodological gap. A lot of this research still depends on people telling us what they feel, instead of, measuring their brain activity or emotional response during a real purchase. Clearly, there's still a lot of work to be done. Okay, so after all that deep dive analysis, the big question is, so what? What does this actually mean for you and your wallet? Well, this brings us to the Moneylytics takeaway. We're going to synthesize everything we just talked about into a brand new and much more accurate framework for you to think about your own spending.
We've boiled all of this complex research down to 3 really crucial takeaways. Number 1, the pain of paying is definitely real, but listen, it is not a fixed rule. It's a psychological state that you can actually change and influence. Number 2, the real drivers of spending friction aren't just cash versus credit, it's payment transparency and timing. How clearly you see the money leaving and when you see it leave is what really counts. And number 3, that feeling of pain is all about context. Your reasons for buying something, the benefits you think you'll get, even social norms, all of that stuff plays a huge role. Look, knowledge is great, but it's pretty useless if you don't apply it. So let's shift gears from just insights to real action. This is your action blueprint, a practical guide to engineering some of that useful financial friction back into your life, all based on the evidence we just went through. All right, here are 3 things you can literally start doing this week. First, stop obsessing about the payment method and shift your focus to transparency. So instead of just forcing yourself to use cash, go into your banking app and turn on real-time spending notifications for your cards. That little buzz in your pocket can bring back that psychological sting for every single purchase. Okay, step 2, engineer some anticipatory pain. Remember how the research showed we feel pain just thinking about paying? Use that. For a big, non-essential purchase, don't just buy it, schedule the payment for a week from now. That forces you to really think about it, to feel that coming loss of funds, and that is a massive check on impulse buys. And finally, step 3, audit your justifications. Go through your recurring payments and subscriptions, and for each one, write down the specific benefit you got from it in the last month. If you can't think of anything, well, the pain of that payment is a huge signal that it's probably time to hit cancel.
And really, this is the whole point. You have the power to consciously design friction back into your financial life, even in our completely cashless world. This isn't about going back in time or ditching your credit cards. It's about using the tools we have today, but using them way more intentionally. So if you're into these kinds of data-driven deep dives where money meets research, do us a favor and hit that like button, and definitely subscribe to Moneylytics so you don't miss our next analysis.
We'll see you next week.